Hello everyone. Welcome to another part of What If Deku Was a Scientist. If you enjoy the story, please like, subscribe and share the video. It really helps me out. I did not write the story. The original writer is that chicken dude. Please go support them. Now let us dive in. Nizu took action right away, as he punched into the PA system and announced, "Attention all students of UA. This is your principal speaking. I am officially giving all of you the freedom to use your quirks. Use them to protect yourselves and the brave men and women trying their best to protect you. Show them what real heroes are made of." Egon and Izuku looked up at the small creature on the stool and held the mic like he was their savior. He smiled down at the two of them and Egon said to him, "Nizu, thank you. It's what heroes do," Nizu told him. As Egon helped Izuku to his feet, he apologetically told the little creature, "And I'm sorry for being so angry with you." Nizu looked off to the side at first as he confirmed for him, "You did have the right, in several situations. But please, dry your eyes. Your people need you," he exclaimed. Egon wipes his face and says, "You're right. Now we need a plan of action." "I've got one," Izuku tells them after drying off his face. Bakugo snickered at this and said, "What? Are you gonna cry at the villains so hard they drown in your tears?" This earned him a smack on the back of the head by Egon, who immediately after apologized to Nizu. "Sorry Nizu, I should have asked you first." No, if you didn't, then I would've," Nizu assured him with a wave of his paw. "Is the peanut gallery done talking?" Izuku asked with his hands on his hips. When everyone went silent to stare at his statement, he said, "Yes. As I was saying, Principal Nizu, how good are you with machines?" "Better than you'd expect," he answered with a chuckle. "Then you stay here and try to hack the communications. We have to get in contact with the outside world," he told him while taking out a splinter off his collar and handing it over to him. "Take this splinter. It holds a force field quirk. Keep a hand or paw at all times, it has a mental activation. Once it's up, it won't go down unless you say so," he explained as Nizu nodded. "Bakugo," Izuku turned to the blonde teen who stood there in shock at being called by that name. "You're our Venger. Anyone who gets in our way, you do what you do best," Izuku told him as he grunted and looked away. "Egon, we need to get to the creature division and then the chemical division. Once we have Gammoth and Honey Lemon we can bust out of here," he told the man who nodded back with fists clenched and expression ready to go. Izuku then looked to the exit door, struck a pose while pointing, and exclaimed, "Let's go stop some villains." Creature division. After getting past the initial shock of seeing a real-life Kraken, it was much easier to take him down than expected. Having many arms didn't mean he was tougher, just could grab more. And they were very soft and squishy. In addition, being bigger just made him a bigger target, and soon he was out of limbs, leaving him a stump and black and blue, and I don't mean from his natural color changing. With no more fight left in him, Otto shrunk back down and backed off with what was left of his limbs. "Looks like the octopus has run out of limbs," one of the villains croaked as they pushed away a giant tentacle. Otto, who only had one limb left, tried to shake a splinter but nothing happened. In his head, he commented, "Crap, the hyper-regeneration quirk splinter isn't working. I knew it was unfinished." "Now all that's left is GAH," one of the villains yelled as they were blasted in the face by blood. All eyes turned to Anima, who had turned his head into a thorny dragon. He sighs and states, "Welp, that's all I've got." When the same villain got back up, he was nailed in the face again, this time by ink. All eyes turned to Otto as he added, "Same here." As the first villain, who got money shot twice, wiped their face off with a furious glare, the other remaining villains followed behind as they surrounded the octopus and the scientist. The two of them backed away until they were cornered and held one another in their arms. "Goodbye Otto. It was an honor to work with you," Genus told his partner. "My only regret is not dying after having sex once," proclaimed Cephalopod. "What?" Genus said, forgetting their situation for a moment. As the villains closed in on the two scientists, the one that got money shot twice was hit in the face yet again. But this time by a laser beam and knocked them out. When the other villains looked over, they saw Aoyama standing with his navel laser glittering. "You keep away from those kind scientists," he demanded flamboyantly. One of the other villains lost his surprise and proclaimed, "What? Do you kids think you have a chance against all of us? Don't make me laugh." Then it was Aways who told them, "We may be kids, but we're also heroes. And heroes always stand up against those who would try to harm the peace and the innocent." Plant division. Once all the plants had something to grab, munch on, or ran out of ammo. It was all a matter of pushing past or cutting them down. Hollyhock had done her best with what she had, and had mentally drained herself to exhaustion as she sat on her knees and sweating buckets. The villains closed in and one of them said while ripping a plant out by the roots, "Once we get through with you lady, we'll burn and weed whack all your stupid plants." But before they could try anything on the woman, a bramble of vine shot out from the ground, snagging several of the villains and wrapping them up or trapping them against the roof, where Ibra came out and proclaimed, "But you'll have to whack all of us first. That's to say you have the roots to do it." Hollyhock smiled up at the holy girl and said, "I like you already, honey." Sound division. Hankyo fell to his hands and knees as he coughed violently and spat blood. He had used his underused quirk with the help of a splinter to the point he ruptured his vocal cords. And now he was helpless to the remaining villains that cornered him. "Lost your voice already, 5-chord Gus?" the villain asked as Hankyo glared at his old name while his head tubes hissed and snapped at him. The villains shrugged and stated, "Too bad, I almost wanted an encore." Before anything could happen, the villain was struck in the head by a punch from Kirishima, who exclaimed, "No encore, but how about a new song? One we like to call," his clone, Tetsu, added in with his punch. Before the two of them got the villain at the same time and yelled, "Beat it." Robotics division. "I wish I had longer to live. I have so many mental notes on how to improve my machines," Hatsum sulked as he was wrapped and slowly being crushed by the female villain and her hair. The female laughed as she boasted, "Oh, too bad for you. Looks like your only ride now is the one to hell." Then Kamakiri came in from the side and slicked through her hair and freed the doctor. He was quickly pulled back by Zero, and once safely deposited, Uraraka came up and began to untie him. "Don't worry, Dr. H. Your metal is weak, but the flesh is far stronger. And today we'll show you just that," she told him as she and the other students stood in her defense. Chemical division. "Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. There's still more of them," Honey Lemon yelled at her giant squirt gun as she slammed her fist on it while rapidly moving her sight from it and the villains closing in. "All out of juice, there, sweetie," one of the villains vexed as the others laughed. "Only to be hit in the body and feet by acid and some kind of glue." "But I'm not," Mina proclaimed. "And neither am I," Bondo added as the two stood back to back in a superhero pose. Weapons division. During her all-out shootout with the villains, Cho quickly ran out of ammo but did not stop fighting. She used the shotgun as a bat and began to club every villain in sight before that broke over someone with a stone body quirk. She then took out 2 katanas and began to be seen like a trained samurai, slicing and dicing everyone who even tried to go after her. Cho was a force of nature and every aspect of her body was a weapon, from her hands to her feet. She used to cave someone's heads in with her heels. She finally meets her match in an electric quirk user that managed to damage her significantly and knock her swords from her grasp. But even as she was bear-hugged and electrocuted, she took the hairpin from her hair and stabbed him multiple times. Once he let go, she stabbed him in the eye before hitting his jugular. Unfortunately, this left her in a critical state as she fell to her face and was only able to shift her head enough to see up. There she saw one of the remaining villains looking down at her with an angry expression. Dr. Orpington was only slightly better since she became vulnerable once her egg cannon ran out and her self-controlled arm chart was destroyed, where she hid for cover behind the teens. "Damn it, you're one tough bitch," he commented while cracking his neck as she just stayed on the ground and breathed heavily. The villains have a snide smile and said, "But, not tough enough." She growls and with what breath she has left, curses, "Screw your head," and the neck it rode in on. The villain kicked Cho in her head and grunted, "Guess we'll have to teach her some manners." "Yeah. Lesson 1, if you want to fight, make it fair," shouted Kendo as she hit the villain away. "Lesson 2, seriously rethink your life choices," Juzo exclaimed as he came from the ground and hooked his legs into the floor. "Lesson 3, don't fuck with heroes. No matter who they are," Sato glared at the villains while punching his fists. "Storehouse. The barrier is almost down. Keep pushing," a villain yelled as they and several others attacked the breaking barrier with different attacks. The Morgana triplets were sweating bullets at this point as they could barely hold it together. When finally they spoke to the teens. "Hey, kids. Listen closely," Megan spoke. "We're about to break, so we need you to do something for us," Millicent told them. "We've only got one trick left. To protect us and yourself as best you can," Morgan asked them with a single tear running down her face. The teens then watched in awe as the 3 women mugged into one long-haired woman with unnatural beauty as she told them, "I'm counting on you." She then breathed as her eyes turned back and spoke, "Power word, kill." With that word spoken, The barrier was reabsorbed into her hand where she pushed it out into a beam of darkness that took the form of the Grim Reaper, which ran towards the villains, and any that was hit by it fell to the floor dead. When the Reaper dissipated, Morgana fell to the floor unconscious. The remaining villains came out of their hiding spots and one of them commented, "What a witch." "Yes, but the only ones getting burned at the stake is you," Momona told them as he stood before them with half of his body on fire and covered in ice. The battle rages on. "Die!" Bakugo shouted as he blasted a villain in the face as the group of 3 ran through the facility. Izuku huffed and puffed as he tried to keep up with his more physically fit guard. Even Egon was faster than him due to his crazy long legs. He wiped the sweat from his brow and said with stress, "I hope we can get to the creature division in time." The final came to the dividing in the building and Bakugo blasted down a welded-shut blast door that ended up crushing 5 villains behind it. They ran through and got to the areas where the scientist and hero trackers were giving a signal. They came to a garage door that Egon threw up and called, "Please tell me you're all alive." Behind the door was Professor Cephalopod and Genus alongside all the children safe and sound with a bunch of dead or unconscious villains. "Don't worry, Professor Egon. We're good and all thanks to these young heroes," Genus told him while motioning to the young heroes who looked scraped up. "Maybe for you. But I'm still missing all of my damn limbs," Cephalopod angrily shouted as his limbs were being bandaged up. "They'll grow back," Genus tried to assure him with a nervous smile. "In several months," he shot back. Egon sighed in relief and proclaimed, "Oh, thank the gods. We have to get to the padlocks then to the chemical division," he told them straight after. The 2 professors looked at one another and asked, "Chemical division? What's in the padlocks?" one of the students asked. "Oh, you'll see," Izuku answered vaguely as he ran off to a different part of the wing. Soon the other young heroes joined him as he crossed through a blasted open garage door that entered another empty oval-shaped room with another garage door in it. There they found the young scientist pushing buttons on a console directly next to it. Before any of them could ask what he was doing, green light glowed and the garage doors raised while releasing a cold breeze into the room that made everyone shiver. Then Gammoth stroked out of her room and trumpeted to announce her arrival. All the teens stood back from the huge creature as it walked out, completely ignoring the kids. Izuku then quickly walked in front of the animal and its eyes locked down on him. Gammoth raised her trunk and used it to stroke and feel the boy's face, making him strike it back in return. As they were having this moment, no one noticed how Bakugo was trying to put as much distance between him and the animals as possible, and Gammoth was keeping an eye on the teen, grumbling as he moved away. "I forgot about the woolly mammoth," Juzo stated nonchalantly. "I can't believe you did," Manga shot back at him, his head turning into a question mark and exclamation point. But before Izuku and Gammoth could enjoy their moment, he got a call, and picking it up he heard the hasty voice of Egon and exclaimed, "Izuku. He's coming your way. Brace yourself." Izuku's eyes widened and Jiro asked, "Who's coming?" Suddenly the sound of something running at max speed and hitting every possible thing along the way was heard down the open doorway, and people started to move to the side in the impending sense. "Torchwick," Izuku drones out as the pony-sized dragon comes barreling through the hall and straight toward Izuku. He stood firm and grounded with his hands out as he shouted, "Calm down, boy. Stay. Hail. Don't dash," but he didn't get another chance to speak as the dragon leaped at him from 20 feet away and knocked him to the ground. "Do this," he groaned out in pain as the dragon kicked his face. While Torchwick was attacking Izuku with love, everyone was standing around him in shock at what they saw until one person stayed obvious and asked, "Is that a freaking dragon?" "Yeah, he is," Izuku answered while trying to push his face away. "How, when, and why?" Ida asked in order. "Science, 2 weeks ago, and discovery," Izuku answered as Gammoth pulled the dragon off him. Before he could be questioned more, Izuku put up his hand and proclaimed, "No more questions. We have to get to the chemical division." Getting to the next division wing was far easier since not only did they have a small army on their side, but they also had Gammoth who only had to stick in the front and bulldoze down anyone bold or stupid enough to try and get in her way. Izuku, surprisingly enough, was the one in front next to Gammoth and the first one to enter the wing and get to Honey Lemon's signal. He threw open the locked door with his super strength, that had her and the others trapped within, and called out, "Honey Lemon. Are you Dash?" Before he could finish, Honey Lemon came out right in front of him and wrapped him in a hug while exclaiming, "Alive. Yes. I'm so glad to see you, Izuku." She then realized what she was doing and put him down while fixing herself and acting more formal. "Oh. I mean, Dr. Midoriya." "Doctor?" everyone asked upon hearing this. Doctor, Izuku confirmed before getting on track and saying seriously, but we don't have time for an explanation. Honey Lemon, we need your skills. She then stood straight and a mock salute replied, you can count on me. What do you need? I need something that can either destroy or weaken reinforced concrete, he told her specifically. Honey Lemon clapped her hands and ran off while saying, I have just the thing. Wait 1 second. While this was happening, a small group of students with Professor Egon were trying to break out of the facility through a wall with the help of Gammoth, who was having no luck. Not even Torchwick's fire breath did anything but blacken the wall. Come on. Can't you break through one wall? Tokage yelled at the animal who glared at her. She's an animal, not a wrecking ball. Give her some credit, Koda told her off, even if she was stressed. Have no fear. Professor Honey Lemon is here. With the solution, the peppy professor said as she came into the room with several small golf-sized gel balls of strange color. The woman then proceeded to throw the gel balls at the walls where they expanded twice their splash radius and bubbled like some kind of chemical before changing colors twice. Once the solution appeared to stop, Honey Lemon commanded, all right Gammoth, now charge. Gammoth trumpeted loudly and charged at the wall, this time it broke all the way through. The wall crumbled like paper and Gammoth trumpeted triumphantly. Everyone go. Go go go, Egon commands as all the young heroes and scientists rush out of the new hole in the wall. Egon picks up his phone, disks a number and says when the other end is picked up, Nizu, we just got the students out. How are you doing? I just managed to punch through whatever it was that was blocking communication. I've sent out several distress calls. Backup should arrive soon and it looks like there's just a few minutes left in your security system reboot, Nizu reported. Thank goodness, Egon breathed a sigh of relief. I also got the security cameras up and running, and I hate to say it, but things are not looking good for our heroes. This made the professor's hair stand on ends. In all the excitement of escaping and getting the kids out he forgot about the heroes, the villains' leaders, and that monster. That monster is far stronger than we thought and I think they're on their last ropes, Nizu admitted, sounding worried. I hope help gets here sooner rather than later. I'll have Izuku send. Egon begins to tell him his plan before trailing off. Nizu notices the one-way silence and says, Professor? Egon looks around for a bit and then asks the dissipating crowds, where's Izuku and Torchwick? Oh no, don't tell me Dashta, he says while looking towards the inside of the building. Gammoth also seemed to realize what happened and she turned tail and charged back inside. Egon, who dropped his phone with Nizu still on the line, ran after the mammoth and called out, Gammoth. Wait. The heroes had done all they could in the fight against the Nomu but it still wasn't enough. That thing was faster, stronger, and more durable than either of them, and worst of all it could heal. Their quirks almost did nothing to the monster and any damage done was nothing. Pretty soon they were overtaken and beaten down badly. Eraserhead had his face smashed in and his spine nearly crushed. Present Mike had his leg broken and his neck chopped so hard it damaged his vocals. Blood Vlad took a blow to the head hard enough to knock him clean out. So the three heroes lay on the ground in a heap of themselves with the monster slowly skulking towards them, ready to finish the job. Present Mike, with still working arms, crawled over to the downed Eraserhead and told him, Shota, I hate to say it. But this looks like the end. Eraserhead barely lifted his head to look at the oncoming monster and replied, I think you might be right. Soon they saw the monster stop, go low, and dash toward them. It was great to fight alongside you, Mike told his friend while closing his eyes. You as well, Erasure agreed while also looking away. However, their imminent demise didn't come and instead, they were met with a strong whipping wind hitting their faces. When they opened their eyes they saw the Nomu trapped behind what looked to be a wall of wind. Confused as to who their savior was, they were drawn to the sound of someone yelling at the monster. Leave them alone, a young voice yelled at the beast as they saw the determined face of Izuku holding out his hand. Ignoring the wall of wind and monster for a moment, Eraserhead lifted his head and yelled as loud as he could muster, What are you doing here, kid? Get out of here. And leave you to die? No thanks, Izuku shot back as he used the wall to push the Noom back. But the creature tried to dig in its feet to keep from sliding, which Izuku changed up to forming spikes of wind that pierced its body, causing it to be pushed away from the helpless heroes. Izuku then sprouted a pair of wings made of the wind and flew just as fast right in between the monster and the heroes. It's our job. It's what we're prepared for, Present Mike tried to argue with him. But Izuku wasn't having any of it as he shot back while arguing, just because you could die, doesn't mean you should. Izuku saw how the Nomu broke through the wind spikes and after healing its wounds, tried to run toward them once more. But Izuku used the spacebending quirk and turned the monster into an abstract artwork. Normally this quirk would cause anyone to become completely immobile from the shock, but the creature started to move outside of the bubble. Izuku realized that the monster was very mindless and wasn't affected by the quirk, knowing it was more of an illusory mental attack. The two heroes looked at the boy in shock and Present Mike exclaimed with his damaged voice, "Whoa! I thought you were quirkless. Where'd all that come from?" Izuku then erected a wall made of stone around them as the Nomu was starting to come out of the space bubble. Once their defense was made, he turned back and complained, "Can we discuss this after we take down the giant monster? I hate to tell you this, kid, but none of us are in any shape to stand, let alone fight," Eraserhead told him. "Wasn't talking about you," Izuku corrected him. Before either of them could ask what he meant, they heard a high-pitched screeching noise coming from above. Looking up, they saw something on blood-orange red wings flying in circles around the auditorium. The creature circled a few more times before finally hovering in the air while screeching. "Is that a dash?" Eraserhead began to ask. "Dragon," Tamura shouted in shock. Torchwick breathed a hefty stream of fire down on the two villains and Kurogyri opened a portal to divert its flow. However, he brought it down too fast and both had to dodge when the pony-sized lizard swooped down on them with claws and teeth ready. Torchwick doubled around after his first attack and shot several fireballs at the two villains, causing them to dodge and move further away from one another. "What the hell kinda science lab is this place?" Tamura exclaimed as he swatted out his shirt that was starting to smoke. "One where we truly underestimated them," Kurogyri inferred while swatting soot off his outfit. "How? This place was newly built and just starting. How could our sources have fallen so far from what it was?" Tamura stressed. "In all fairness, we did do it last minute when UA decided to come here instead of the USJ, Kurogyri told him, making Tamura growl. But he didn't have time to stew in anger as Torchwick came down and blasted the two villains with a smokescreen. Tamura attempted to sus out Kurogyri in the smoke, but even though it was one cover, it was so thick that it was like walking through a first on a new moon. Then he saw a pair of glowing eyes in the dark and walked to them, only for the eyes to flash a set of teeth and jump him. Despite his unhealthy-looking physique, Tamura was surprisingly fast and strong. However, now wasn't one of those times for him to show it. Despite Torchwick being smaller than the man, he was far stronger than most humans and had the man pinned down with his claws as he dug his fangs into his throat. Torchwick had him in such a position that not only could Tamura only kick his legs, but he couldn't even make a sound. Torchwick was doing what all predators do and choking out their prey before eating it. Tamura attempted to bring up his hand to use his quirk, but every time he did, the claws would only sink deeper in. Tamura was starting to black out and he could see his whole life flash before his eyes, and it was horrible. Just before everything went out and he was devoured by the animal, a gunshot rang out and Torchwick let go of the villain. He stretched out in pain as he stumbled off his body and Tamura gasped for air. He looked over and saw the dragon with a bullet wound on his shoulder, and looked to the other side to see Kurogyri with a gun in hand, pointing it at the small creature. Torchwick trunks to the man and screeches. Kurogyri points the gun again, but this time when he fires another bullet, Torchwick evaporates it alongside the portal the Mist Man attempts to put up in defense, setting the man ablaze for a moment. But it is only for a moment as Tamura rolls over and slaps his hand on the animal's flank, causing it to decay to the point where its rib cage and organ are exposed. Torchwick falls to the ground, appearing dead. Tamura gets up and walks back over to the Mist Man as he manages to put the fire out before it can engross him further. Only for the two of them to watch as the seemingly dead body of Torchwick rises and the wound begins to rapidly heal. Tamura growls at this and looks back over to the Nomu, expecting several corpses to be strung about. Instead, he sees the Nomu trying to break through the many layers of stone walls that are easily replaced and added on by Izuku to keep it at bay. "Enough of this crap. I'm gonna get rid of that kid myself," Tamura proclaims while stamping over the monster and teen. Meanwhile, the Nomu had just broken through the last stone wall and came upon the sight of nothing. No matter where it looked, the other side of the ever-growing stone walls was nothing. It was like the heroes just disappeared. However, that is only half true. The heroes and Izuku did disappear, but only from sight and not the spot. In truth, the young man and pros had turned completely invisible, and the mindless creature didn't seem to know or understand this as it just stood there and looked around. But its attention was caught when Tamura announced, "Nomu. Get the flying lizard." The Nomu obeyed its command and turned tail to run after the regenerating dragonling. Tamura, who saw the trick being played out, ran and tackled Izuku, causing the invisibility to drop. Before he could use his quirk on the teen, Izuku turned into smoke and slipped right out from him while rising into the air. After reforming and sprouting the wings of the wind, Izuku used the wind to create blades of it while throwing them down on all the villains and the monster. Kurogyri opened portals to avoid them while Tamura dodged with every ounce of speed he had yet still got nicked, while the Nomu took everything head-on and grew back whatever was sliced or removed. Izuku saw this happen and wanted to try something else, but didn't get the chance as Tamura appeared from a portal above and drop-kicked him back to the ground. The villain went to grab him with his hand, but only managed to grab and decay his coat before Izuku turned around, grabbed his arm, and using his super strength threw the man away. Izuku then grabbed and ripped up a huge section of seats in the auditorium and threw it at the villain. Kurogyri opened another portal and allowed the seats to fly straight through. Izuku then creates a tornado around the villain to trap them while he tries to subdue the monster. He runs after the creature and with all his strength sends a punch right into its back. Much to his surprise, his fist is absorbed into its body before sending him flying back like a trampoline. Izuku realized quickly that physical attacks won't work any better than mental, so he'd have to try something else and fast. He saw the monster's exposed brain and started to craft the wind into blades once more, aiming for the weak spot. However, he didn't get the chance as Tamura is upon him again and the two of them went locked into a game of cat and mouse. Meanwhile, Torchwick had completely healed itself and even pushed out the bullet wound from its side. After cracking its neck, it saw the huge creature barreling at him. He tried to deter it with a shriek, but it didn't even flinch at his display of aggression. He took to the air. Though he didn't get far as his tail was grabbed by the monster, that was the wrong thing to do as Torchwick set it ablaze with fire. The Nomu grabbed at its face to ward off the fire, freeing Torchwick and allowing it to take to the ceiling above where he flew in circles and began to pepper him with fireballs. The Nomu's vision returned and it turned its back against the onslaught of fire. The creature looked back, saw the small dragon, and jumped toward it. The monster grabbed the dragon and threw it to the ground where it landed on top of him, causing it to cry out in pain from its broken ribs. The Nomu grabbed the dragon's head and tried to crush it while Torchwick fought back and breathed fire, but it did very little. He was still so young and his fire wasn't anything to scream about. The little creature had to do something, otherwise this thing would kill him. Suddenly something stored in the little animal's soul and something like a small flame that was engulfed into something akin to the feeling of a wildfire that blazed within him. And with a newfound sense of fire and vigor, Torchwick expelled a blast of fire so hot and so powerful that it melted the monster's hand clear off its face and much of the arm attached. Torchwick used its superheated fangs to rip off the Nomu's foot from his body and used its surprisingly long tail to whip it in the head, stunning it and causing it to fall over. Once Torchwick was back up on his own feet, he rammed the downed creature in its head with his horns before grabbing it by the back, lifting it into the air as far as he could before dropping it down. The Nomu bounced like a ball before Torchwick came down on it, returning the previous favor and setting its back on fire with a wave of flames. The small creature then took the monster's good leg in its teeth and threw it toward the stage where Nomu got caught in the curtains, thus allowing the dragon to breathe a stream of fire that set the drapes on fire with the caught monster. Torchwick thought he had defeated its foe until another gunshot was heard and the dragon felt something hit the back of its head. He scratched the area and pulled out a bullet. Turning around to see Kurogyri, he wasted no time in shooting a fireball at the mist man. As usual, Kurogyri tried to put up a portal for the flaming ball to pass through, but instead, it burned through the portal and hit him dead on. Kurogyri screamed as he was set on fire and desperately tried to roll himself out. Torchwick saw this, licked his lips, and got low like a stalking predator. He would take out the mist man before calcifying the other man that was quickly overtaking Izuku. Though he didn't get the chance, the Nomu, now mostly healed up, jumped out of its flaming person, tackled the dragon, and tried to crush it in his hands. Torchwick countered by latching down on its exploded brain and getting ready to fire. But the Nomu learned from its old mistakes and grabbed the dragon's neck and chest. Torchwick countered again by clawing its face and arms while stabbing it in the neck with his tail. Meanwhile, Izuku was not doing so well against the far more experienced villain, and even with several quirks at his disposal, Izuku still had no experience in fighting and was just trying to hit him with whatever he had. It had gotten to the point that Izuku was flying around with the villain doing everything in his power to touch him, leading to a mid-air tussle where Izuku was using his super strength to either hold back or snap the villain's bones. He was even trying to hypnotize him, but that didn't seem to do anything. Eventually, he was slammed into a wall and the villain pushed off against it and sent Izuku falling to the ground where they both took a nosedive. After crashing, Tamura was back upon Izuku and was trying to rot him away, but Izuku used his super strength to hold him back and break his bones, but was starting to lose his focus in all the chaos. Yet having his bones broken didn't seem to deter Tamura as he saw the look of desperation and fear on the teen's face as he continued to press down despite his wrists about to snap like glow sticks. He growled down at the teen with malicious intent while asking, "Any last words?" Izuku's expression changed for a moment to calm and with a smile of his own he replied, "Flame on." Tamura felt something sticky and cold hit his wrist as they were being held back, but he didn't have time to question it as suddenly the teen and himself were engulfed in flames. Tamura screamed as he was set ablaze and Izuku used the opportunity to punch him in the face and send his burning body flying. "Young master," Kurojairi cried out as he rushed to his ward. "Put me out! Put me out!" Tamura cried out in desperation as he tried to wipe the fire from his body. The mist man quickly produced a fire extinguisher from a portal and put the young man out who lay now laid on the ground in exhaustion and pain. Kurojairi leaned down and felt Tamura's body, feeling something sticky on him and realizing what it was observed aloud, kerosene gel. He then stood up, looked towards Izuku with his pistol, and told him, "I hope you realize I have to kill you now." "Not if we have anything to say about it," a voice yelled at him as the sound of heavy fast footsteps ran towards them. When the two villains looked in the direction of the new voice, there barreling through the destroyed auditorium was Egon on the back of a charging and angry-looking Gammoth. The villains didn't have a moment to spare as Gammoth was upon them and using her tusks to send them flying off in the opposite direction. When they crashed into the other side, the mammoth continued her charging and once she was upon them again, she raised on her back legs and brought her front ones down. Kurojairi rapped away while Toma rolled, though this didn't deter her as she relentlessly went after the one she could still see. Then using her forelimb she held down Tamura, wrapped her trunk around his neck, and began to pull. Tamura could only flail like a fish as the ancient elephant attempted to pull him apart. But he survived this when Kurojairi remanifested and shot her in the side. Thanks to her woolly coat, thick skin, and a layer of fat, the bullet did very little damage and only pissed her off even more. Grumbling at the mist man, she let her foot off the young man and used him like a flail to smack right into the mist man, sending him and Tamura flying away as she trumped angrily. After collecting himself, catching his breath, and shaking off the previous feeling of nearly being pulled apart, Tamura commented in anguish, "Now a woolly mammoth. What the fuck is this place?" Ijin, who had jumped off Gammoth a while ago, saw Torchwick struggling against the Nomu and said to the elephant, "Gammoth, go help Torchwick." Gammoth looked at the monster, grumbled and charged at it while Ijin pointed an angry finger to Izuku while telling him, "You and I will talk later." Izuku sighs in stress and replies, "I know." Gammoth charged at full speed towards the monster and it had no time to react as the huge animal rammed into it, causing it to fly off and release Torchwick. Gammoth then held the monster down, grabbed one of its limbs with her trunk, and pulled until the limb came off. When the monster showed no signs of being affected by the limb ripping or being dead, she kept pulling off limbs until she finally got to the head. But by then, the Nomu regrew its first arm and grabbed the trunk. After ripping it off its neck, its other limbs grew back and it stood up before taking Gammoth by the trunk, swinging her around, and throwing her to the side. After doing so, Torchwick surprised the monster and tried to chew off its brain, but the Nomu caught him before any mange could be made. Gammoth got back to her feet after being thrown and saw Torchwick fighting the Nomu again. She charged once more, but this time the monster saw her and threw off the dragon. It collided fist with tusk and they both cancelled each other out. Despite her strength and size, she was far slower than the Nomu and its punches broke through her defenses with ease, leaving her to flail about as she tried to swat at it. Torchwick aided and distracted the creature by attacking the part of its back it could reach, which gave Gammoth more than enough time to swing herself towards the monster and slam it with her tusks, but the blow was shot right back at her with its bouncy skin. Changing her tactics, she raised on her hind legs and brought her forelimbs down, however, Nomu caught them. Gammoth raised tons and was putting all her weight into the rushing attack, but the Nomu was far stronger than her weight and was starting to push her back until Torchwick came to its chest and breathed a hole right through its torso, weakening the monster and allowing her to crush the monster underfoot. Unlike last time, the Nomus body didn't bounce it back, but only absorbed it for a moment before starting to cave in from the constant pressure. Gammoth put all her weight into flattening the monster while Torchwick blew fire in its face, making the monster cover up with its still free hands. Meanwhile, the villains were in a losing battle with the two scientists. Their only defense was Kurogyri's portals as the two men hit them with a plethora of quirks. Using the space bubble quirk, Izuku would destroy their defense while Egon would either shoot lasers or breathe out freezing ice. Kurogyri would put up a new portal just as fast when blades of wind came to their way and bolts of electricity from Egon. Kurogyri would try to use the gun every chance he got, but Izuku would put up a stone wall, and when it felt like they would change positions thanks to invisibility and start the cycle again. If things for the villains didn't look bleak before, then their chances slipped further when Egon called for the Mimikides to attack. Before they knew it, the villains were beset by a whole horde of lockboxes with major awards and teeth. Luckily, this was one of the things that Tamura could do in the long-range shootout and managed to take out every Mimikide that got close enough but still got kicked or bit up here and there. In a calm panic, Kurogyri informed him, "Young master, we must retreat. You are in no shape to continue fighting and All Might still isn't here. We can use Nomu another day." "No. Not until one of them is dead," Tamura agreed while gritting his teeth. Tamura looked over at his monster only to see it getting manhandled by the two animals. Even though the mobster had gotten back to its feet, it was knocked in its brain by a seat wrapped in the trunk of Gammoth before getting grabbed by Torchwick and getting flown headfirst into a wall as more fire was breathed on it. "You were saying, young master?" Kurogyri inquired. Tamura gripped and rotted the ground in frustration before exclaiming, "I want the Nomu to kill the heroes at least." Kurogyri obliged this request and commanded the monster, "Nomu, dispose of the heroes." Just as the Nomu was crawling out of the rubble, a voice called over the PA system, "Oh, you'll be doing no such thing." "The rat," Tamura growled. He announced excitedly, "because the security system is back online." Boy, did that feel longer than 5 minutes. A small chuckle was heard as he stated with a dark tone, which means, "Warning, all kill protocols have been engaged and all non-registered vital records will be immediately eliminated," the security system announced. "I would say it was nice to know you, but, well, you know," Nizu told them as several miniguns descended from the ceiling and pointed at the villains and their monster. "Dance, you vile monkeys, dance." Nezukaklat wildly. "Sometimes I forget he's a high-functioning sociopath," Egon stressed with a sweat drop as Izuku stood there in uncomfortable silence. Without a moment to spare, the guns began to fire on all cylinders at them with fatal intent. Kurogyri acted fast and wrapped his form around Tamura in a protective shield, causing the bullets to pass straight through harmlessly. The Noom, on the other hand, was peppered with so much firepower that its bouncy skin broke within seconds and holes opened all over its body, turning it from monster to Swiss cheese in seconds. Gammoth then grabbed the stunned monster by the foot and threw it into a Tesla gate where it was shocked with several thousand joules of electricity before getting flung out by the power and straight into Torchwick's mouth, where he grabbed its brain and bit off a huge chunk. Only for the guns to pepper it even more to the point the system detected no more life, where it turned back to the villain to subject them to bullet hell. "Welp. There goes your monster," Nizu chuckled in a vexing tone to the villains. Without another word for argument, Kurogyri engulfed himself around Tamura and began to teleport him. Where the young man angrily declared, "This isn't the last you've seen of me. Mark my words, I'll be back again and I'll tear you and the place to nothing." With that, the last two villains vanished and the security system stopped no longer sensing the intruders. "I am here," All Might announced while striking a pose as he jumped into a crowd of heroes and law officials surrounding the NIP facility. "You are late," Nizu stated next to the huge man, who landed just inches by accidentally stepping on him. "What? Late?" All Might exclaimed in surprise while looking down at the mouse. "Yes, All Might, late. The villains are dealt with and the day is saved, mostly," Aizawa told him as he lay in a stretcher with an EMT tending to his wounds. All Might looked around at the area, seeing that Present Mike, Erasered, and Blood Vlad were in several states of injury, with all being tended to by EMT. No doubt they were in a huge battle, and so he inquired, "All thanks to you three, right?" Nizu shook his head and explained, "Not this time. It was a great deal of thanks to the scientists and staff of NIP and the students of classes 1A and 1B. "That's surprising, but wonderful to hear," All Might exclaimed with zeal. "Ahem. If I may interject," a voice called out in between their conversation. Nizu then walked up to the man and motioned with his paw. He introduced, All Might, this is Professor Egon Cristallo, the head researcher and owner of NIP. Egon nods and says with a bit of malice, Principal Nizu failed to mention you'd come today. But putting that aside, why were you late? You could have been of great help. All Might taps his fingertips together and starts, Well, where should I start? Egon slaps his face while looking away and waving his hand as he tells him, on second thought, never mind. I hope nothing too bad happened, All Might asks in a concerned tone. Egon raised his eyebrow and listed off, You mean apart from being invaded, hacked, trapped, attacked, and have in the ballpark range of $1 million in damages due to the attack, alongside the injuries accrued by my staff. All Might felt awkward now as he could almost taste the man's irritation, and trying to change the subject he asked while looking ready, Well, anyway, where are the villains? Present Mike shivered hard in a mix of disgust and fear, everywhere. All Might was confused by his reaction and vague answer until he saw what he meant. A few hundred yards away, All Might could see a crime scene cleaning crew go in and out of the building with body bag after body bag, adding toe tags, writing down information, taking pictures of the cadavers, and so forth. All Might saw it was bad, but it couldn't be as bad as Present Mike was saying. Until he overheard an officer say that they had about 200 dead villains in total to report about, and that was just a ballpark estimation since many more hadn't been found, couldn't be identified, and one of them was found inside of a plant with teeth. All Might gulped as he tried to find a new escape plan, and seeing the two groups of UA students being questioned he said, I think I'll just go that way. Once All Might had dashed off in a fake attempt of concern, Nizu sighed and turned to Egon to tell him, Well, Professor, I can't help but feel I owe you an apology. Egon was taken aback and shocked by this statement and countered, I mean you did apologize for you out-of-control student, which I'm not forgiving you for, but I don't think I'm owed more. If it weren't for me, these villains wouldn't have come and put your facility, and more importantly, your employees in danger. I'm truly sorry, we'll pay for everything, he told him while bowing deeply. Egon waved his hands rapidly and said with a mix of stress and nervousness, Nizu, please don't apologize for that. It's not your fault. No one could have expected something like this. And besides, I should be the one to thank you for allowing your students to fight in our defense. We'd probably be dead if not. He then calmed down at seeing the mouse still bowing, only to tell him, and please don't worry about paying for everything. I only expected what Bakugo broke, anything you give I'll accept as a donation. New raised his head with a smile and told him, Thank you, Professor. I hope we can rebuild our relationship in the coming future. Egon smiled back but told him in a serious tone, I wouldn't mind that, just keep that child on a tight leash and away from my lab until he has a major attitude adjustment. Nizu chuckles dryly while sweat drops, agreeing with his demand. Egon then walked away from the mouse and back to the facility where Izuku was sitting on the steps as he was questioned by the police. Once he was certain no one could hear him, he moved to erase red as the EMT finished with him and the tired man asked him, Did you find out anything? Nizu nods and tells him in a serious tone, Lots and lots. Your source was right, Eraser. Something is going on there. And it's strange, to say the least. I'm not sure how they're doing it, but it has something to do with those splinters. I mean, quirks in a crystal? That's new to me. Should I keep an eye on them? Eraser offers. Nizu nods and says, Please do. I feel as though they have good intentions, but if they turn bad, we'll have to do something drastic. Eraserhead sighs and stresses, I hope it doesn't come to that. I don't know how anyone is gonna take on a highly secure facility, an army of robots, a dragon, a woolly mammoth, quirks in a bottle, 2 animals on the same intelligence level as you, and whatever else they got cooking up in there, to which Nizu silently nods while thinking up all the worst scenarios. And is that everything? The officer asked as he took down the final note from Egon and Izuku. Yes sir, that's everything we can tell and what's on the video feed we gave you, Izuku affirmed. So about this dead monster. Where is it? The officer asks while lifting the brim of his hat to look around and inside the building. Good question. Pretty sure the villains made off with it after they made their escape. We don't even have a recording of it disappearing on the tape. Trust me, we reviewed it after seeing it vanish, Egon points out. Well, that sure is a predicament, the officer sighs while noting it down. I'm sorry about what happened to your facility and I hope that you're able to rebuild it quickly. Have a nice day sirs, he tells them while tipping his hat before walking away. Izuku and Egon waved off the officer and once he was out of earshot, Egon turned to Izuku and congratulated him. Good thinking with the invisibility splinter, Izuku. After seeing that thing in action, I'm really curious how it ticks. Izuku smiles at the praise given until Egon follows up, now just one thing remains. Where did you put the invisible giant dead creature? Izuku opens his mouth to answer, then shoots open his eyes and goes silent and pale, which is more than enough of an answer for Egon, who sucks air between his teeth and laments, "Oh boy, this is gonna be fun." This is Dr. Izuku Midoriya reporting on a highly classified experiment with Professor Egon Cristallo and Professor Otto Cephalopod. For reference, a few days ago, we were attacked by the League of Villains when the head hero classes of UA came by. We survived, obviously, but we managed to kill and hide the body of the monsters they called the Nomu. After turning it invisible to hide it, we simultaneously lost it and then found it again within the stomach of a particular large mimicity. Now we are starting an autopsy and dissection of the creature to find out its workings. Begin. By looking at the cadaver we can't immediately tell if it is human or not. Although it has an upright posture and hands with opposable digits, it could very well be some kind of animal mutated with human DNA. Professor Cephalopod has taken several blood and tissue samples to Dr. Orpington to determine the exact creature it is. Several things about the cadaver stick out, the first being its massive height and muscle mass. This thing is nearly taller than All Might himself, and he's one of the tallest people in Japan, and just as, if not more so, muscular than he is. I have never seen larger muscles on anything that doesn't have it as a quirk or through the use of drugs. These muscles are so big I'm surprised the creature was able to move in the first place, yet it could run with such grace and turn on a dime. Going back to its height-to-body composition ratio, the only other person taller than this thing is the hero Fat Gum and his quirk fat absorption. But his height is natural and his body fat is far less dense than regular fat, making it easy for him to walk, move, and fight. The cadaver probably has some sort of hidden mechanic in its body similar to it. The second thing that sticks out right away is its brain. Although heavily damaged in the fight, its cranium was non-existent, allowing it to be exposed. Not clear, not some thin transparent filament, not even invisible, just exposed right to the nasal bone. The whole reason for the skull is to protect the extremely fragile brain, which is the main function of the whole body of any complex creature. The fact that something so important was just exposed to, whatever in the world, makes me think it's not so important for the creature's survival. Despite it having many wrinkles in it, allowing for intelligent thought, it did not show any sort of intelligence and took orders when directly given like a trained dog or AI. The other surprising thing was its eyes, which just seemed to be hooked directly into the brain. What purpose this serves or even if it could see is unknown. The third thing that sticks out is its skin, charcoal black. It's not hard or rough or anything, it's quite soft and squishy, almost like jello when touched. Which explains why it was able to take blows but not cuts. We had to stop Professor Cephalopod from playing with it midway through the observation process. Though I will admit it is quite fun. Like playing with pudding. Then the final thing that sticks out is its pants, which leads us to believe it was human in the first place. After all, why put any clothing on an animal? Humans are the only ones with a sense of shame. So after pulling them down, we were surprised to see that it had no male genitalia whatsoever. In fact, it had no genitals at all. I guess during its transformation, it lost them or they got removed, but no signs of scar tissue could be seen, so surgery is ruled out. With the observation portion out of the way, now we move on to the actual autopsy and dissection. Carefully removing what was left of the brain, we find that it has the same amount of wrinkles, shape, size, and color as a human brain. The eyes hooked right into the optic center have shown no sign of surgical meddling, meaning that the eyes being so close to the brain tell it's a result of a quirk. Seeing how close the distance is, now we can assess that the creature had an excellent vision that could also process fast-moving images quickly. We'll send the brain off for more in-depth testing of its intrinsic signals and how they move. Moving down, we find that the lower jaw is, or was, completely intact with a full set of human teeth over a large beak. A normal thing for those with an avian quirks. But why have this feature at all? Perhaps it's vestibular like the genitals and brain. Either way, upon cutting into it we find the vocals to be extremely damaged. Almost as if they had been inflamed and then constricted, not allowing for any intelligent speech and being limited to grunts and roars. From here we open the creature's body cavity, and boy is it a mess. Its lungs and heart have been inflamed to massive proportions, which is needed for a creature of its size, in addition to having a second heart. It has no stomach, liver, pancreas, or gallbladder, and in place is a single organ that I can only guess is to keep it sustained. It has just shy of 2 inches of intestines, both large and small, no reproductive organs, and no rectum or anus. Honestly, this thing is just a mess. After cutting it open further, we discovered that its bones are made entirely of metal. That explains how something so big, and heavy, could hold itself up. The metal is unique and nothing has been seen, even amongst quirks like it. We attempted to cut into it with several methods but only got success after using a plasma's cutter and found it was metal all the way through, allowing for the support of such a huge body and showing it had very unusual metabolic needs. Next, we took a look at its muscle composition and it's amazing. The muscles are like that of an 8-fold metal samurai sword. Muscles stacked on top of one another, making them huge. It explains its superhuman strength and how it was able to withstand the crushing weight of a 6-ton mammoth several times. Its ligaments were in the same category as its muscles but were far more flexible, allowing for easy movement. After this, we assumed that our dissection of the creature was complete until we saw parts of its body regenerating. We almost assumed it was still alive, but after evacuating the room and putting heavy firearms next to it, making sure if it got up it wouldn't again, we say it wasn't still alive. After checking its unbeating heart and brainless head, it was concluded that it was most definitely dead. So after calming down, we saw how the body was repairing itself, but ever so slowly. Even in death, this thing's regeneration is amazing. We didn't think it would be able to self-resurrect, but just to be sure we didn't have a starfish case on our hands, we separated the creature into many different parts. After this, we took several skin, muscle, and bone samples for further study while we burned the rest. With that, this ends our dissection of the cadaver. Note: fire destroys the regeneration process. This is Dr. Mitaraya again, coming to report with more news on the cadaver, and honestly, I'm terrified and sickened to even try and talk about it. After sending the blood, flesh, and brain to Orpington to be further studied, we found out several things about the creature. 1. That thing was definitely a human, no doubt about it. 2. While, whatever was happening to it, this person was still alive. And 3. The person's mind was still in there, buried deep away. How we figured this was thanks to the doctor testing all its parts. Apparently, she made a machine that when hooked up to any amount of brain matter, so long as it's intact and not damaged to the point of being considered chopped meat, it can actively read and recreate certain images or thoughts of a person. I hear the recordings, dispute Egon's warnings, and I wish I had listened. The person was in there, buried deep behind who knows what, and was in pain the whole time, begging to stop or to just kill them. These screams, God, these screams are gonna haunt me. Nothing like what you see and hear in the movies, not even close. But I can't feel bad now, what's done is done and I hope they're at peace. And at the very least I can be assured knowing there is nothing that could be done for them. No reset button or cure. Just the release of death. Okay, I'm rambling, but in essence, the reason for this is the cadaver's quirk, or rather, many quirks. It had so many in its body. And I'm not talking like 2 or 3, I'm talking like dozens. It had so many and had been mutated so far that death was the only humane thing to do. In order, it had the following quirks we designated by name: bird person, soft and stretch, muscles, big and wide, super organ, W heel, metal bones, mind null, super punch out. Bird person, an avian quirk that I assume was supposed to give the power of flight but only manifests as a bird's beak. Soft and stretch. This one allows the body to stretch and absorb blows like there is nothing, nearly making the body similar to rubber. Muscle, this gives the increased muscle mass that stacks on top of one another but no superhuman strength. Big and wide, makes a person taller and wider at the shoulders. Super organ, makes certain organs far larger in the body and changes certain parts to compensate for it. W heel, grants super speed regeneration and a natural cooling system that prevents the body from catching fire at rapidly regeneration cells. Metal bones, makes bones into metal. Mind null, makes a mind blank to the point of being immune to mental attacks and pain, and acts separately for the action of the body or allows for implanted control. Super punch out, this gives the super strength factor for the increase in muscles. After this, I started to wonder why this creature was made with such a specific set of quirks. It couldn't have been just a coincidence, and it wasn't. That's when I realized that this thing was designed to kill All Might. And it makes sense. The height to not be at a size disadvantage, the super strength to go against his own and all the other things to accommodate it, the skin to absorb blows, the super regeneration for any damage done, and the attempted avian quirk. All Might specifically has trouble with foes who can fly. This thing was made to be an All Might killer. Luckily they didn't count on us, Gammoth or Torchwick. We still have the skin and muscle for further testing, and Otto has requested to make a splinter of the cadaver's quirks. Egon greenlit this project, curious if it could even be done or if we would have to separate all the other quirks into separate splinters. Well, find out soon enough. However, there is only one question remaining: where did the League get that thing and who made it at all? End of log. Okay people, Egon stated as he slapped a meeting table that he and the entire staff of NIP were all sitting around. Now I'm sure you all know why I've called you all here today, he asked them rhetorically. Because, it's your birthday, Izuku asked innocently. No. Is it my birthday, asked Hankyo. No. Are we getting a raise, Genus asked hopefully. No. You're gonna give me full and unrestricted access to the Singularity Soul, Hatsum exclaimed in excitement. No. You finally got a girlfriend at 30, Cho asked while slapping the table as Orpington clucked a laugh. Are we gonna do this? Egon asked back, already done with this charade. Then Honey Lemon spoke up and asked cautiously, does it have to do with the fact that we were attacked and well underprepared, only getting out of it by the skin of our teeth due to our adversaries not doing their homework on us? The massive damages accrued by the said attack? Or the rapidly developing dragon we have stored away? Egon sighs as he runs his nose and answers back, yes on all fronts. Going in no order, although the damages we faced were rather extravagant, we are more than able to fix them thanks to our funds and the ones provided by UA as a sorry/donation. On the other hand, if this event has taught us anything, it's that we are sourly underprepared for what's to come. We're working with tech and knowledge that I'm sure countries will go to war for. So we have to outfit this facility with all the measures of a small country's worth of military protection. So that is why I want all of you to be firing on all cylinders to make this place as secure as possible. This is a top priority. I'm talking about new tech, security codes, defenses, force fields, anti-warp quirk generators, literally anything you can think or make to get this place as safe and secure as possible, he exclaimed. Yes sir, everyone around the table replied in unison. And, the dragon? Otto inquired. Ah yes, him, Egon said with a huff before stressing, little Torchwick isn't so little anymore. I liked him better when he was the size of a parrot, Orpington squawked in complaint. So you could bully him, Otto chastised her. He tried to eat me, she fought back. Once and only once, Otto corrected her as she tried to peck at his newly grown tentacles. We still haven't fully determined how big he'll grow and I don't think we can continue increasing the enclosure sizes for him. Heck, I don't think such a thing could exist. Especially alongside the fact that he can fly, Izuku lamented. And we can't just let him go gallivanting off wherever he wants, Cho added. And no country in the world is gonna let us keep a dragon on their soil without wanting to know details, Hollyhock says. I hate to say it but we may have to terminate him, Genus admits with a somber tone. Izuku looked down at the table, tightening his fists as tears well up in his eyes as he says back, I hate to say it, but you may be right. Not really, Hollyhock interjects. All eyes fall on the smiling woman as Egon asks her, you have an idea, Hollyhock? She nods and tells the group, more of a working theory. You remember when you gave me a piece of the Singularity Soul? What? Hatsum suddenly exclaimed, making everyone look at him. You gave her a piece of it but are foraying me? He complained. Egon slaps his face and tells him, Hollyhock has her head screwed on right and doesn't want to make a death ray with it. Ah. But why can't I make a death ray? He whines like a child. Because I say so, Egon yells at him, causing the man to sit down with a sulk. After calming himself down and pushing back his hair, Egon turns back and says, continue Pam. Well I took a small sample from the piece and I managed to make a little something I like to call the reset bomb, she explained to them. Reset bomb? What's that? Egon and Izuku say at the same time. She then pulls out a folder and opens up to a picture of something strange looking. It appears like a small machine on the verge of breaking to pieces but held up and enraptured by vibes, roots, leaves, and other plant life with a glow at the center that illuminates like a flame. When this little device hits any soil it will instantly shoot back up an entire forest of indigenous plant life. Almost like if humans never cultivated it, she explained to the group, making Izuku and Egon drop their jaws. If I can make one big enough, tweak it a bit, and send it to the bottom of the ocean, I could potentially make an island that the dragon could live on alongside any other animals or plants that can't be brought into the public, and we can bring ourselves to terminate or keep," she explained her idea. Egon shoots up from his seat and exclaimed, "Hollyhock, you're beautiful." She then took a saddened and serious time as she told him, "Don't thank me yet, there's just one problem with it." Everyone looks at her confused by the comment until she tells them, "I have no idea how or where to test it." Egon slumps back in his seat, deep in thought as he thought aloud, "That is a good point. Where in all of Japan could we use the reset bomb?" As everyone was pondering on how to remedy this problem, a thought struck Izuku and he pronounced, "I think I have just the thing." Later. "You know, Izuku, I'll be honest, I didn't think you meant here of all places," Egon told Izuku through the built-in speaker on his high-concentration radiation suite. "Seriously? Where were you expecting?" Izuku asked back through his suite, as he and Hollyhock set up what looked like a giant mechanical slingshot. Izuku set the machine into place as the woman punched in coordinates on a device connected to it. Egon shrugged and then irritated said back rhetorically, "I don't know? One of the several illegal logging sites in Japan. Just not Hokkaido," he stressed while motioning to the dead zone a few yards away from them. Dead trees, poisonous soil, and cracked ground that looked dry and mucky were just a few of the wasteland sites starched out before the once prosperous northern part of Japan that was once a hub for new and improved nuclear energy. But that's why it's perfect. If the reset bomb can turn an environment back to before it was inhabited, then testing to see if it can destroy radioactive isotopes is just what we need, Izuku exclaimed in excitement. "I have to agree with him. It's genius," Hollyhock agreed. "Pam, I'm trying to be the voice of reason here. This place is a second Cornville. The isotopes here are so powerful that, even with cleanup, this place will be unsafe for the next 3,000 years, he exclaimed in a half-yell, getting two sets of vastly different reactions to his outburst. Making the man deflate as he told them, "You'd better hope this reset bomb is as powerful as you say it is." After this the coordinates were locked on and each reset bomb was primed and ready. Egon had the pleasure of launching them and ended up laughing like a child the whole time, much to the amusement of the other scientists. Izuku looks at a screen he was holding and said, "All right, all 12 have been deployed." Egon lay on the ground of the large flatbed vehicle they were riding on. He was out of breath from laughing and said with a red flush face, "Gotta say, launching highly dangerous eco-bombs from a high-tech slingshot is tons of fun." Eventually he got up and after calming down he asked, "How long till they take effect?" "They should start as soon as they hit the soil," Hollyhock answered. Professor," Izuku called, making Egon walk up to him as the teen continued, "The isotopes have gone down." "Already? How far down?" he asked as he looks over his shoulder at the isotope reader in his hand. His eyes went wide as it read virtually nothing, and asked while snatching the device and poking at it, "Is this thing broken?" "No. This is it," Izuku affirmed. Soon the three scientists were brought to the attention of a very strange sound. They looked out into the distance and saw all the plant life begin to resurrect from this rotten poisonous death. All around and far into the distance, they saw trees and flowers sprout and bloom up in huge groves and thick canopies. With eyes wide and isotope reader dropped, Egon could only whisper, "Oh my gods," before spreading his arms and proclaiming, "It worked, it worked, it worked." The man began to jump around for joy as Izuku hugged Hollyhock and told her, "Your invention did it, Pamela." Pamela couldn't help but smile and look on at her work. But before they could continue, Izuku suddenly exclaimed, "Wait!" The two scientists look at the teen as he asks the woman, "Do you have more?" "Even more later. And that does it. The entirety of Hokkaido is now radioactive free," Izuku told the scientist as he looked at his screen map of the subsection of Japan and the isotope reader. All around them a sea of new plant life and no harmful radiation. With no fear of mutation from radiation poisoning, they took off their suits and tossed them to the side as they breathed in the new air of a long-gone place. And a new forest is growing on top of all of it. "At least that means there's plenty of building material," Egon said in a chipper tone while picking some wild fruit off one of the trees. "Hollyhock, I hope you're proud, you just reopened an entire region of Japan for those who lost their home," Izuku congratulated the woman. "I'm happy to have done my part for the community," Hollyhock says with a smile at feeling the plants around her sing her praises for giving them back life. "That's all well and good, but I suggest we beat feet out of here before the government catches wind of the fact their cesspool of catastrophe is now safe for human life," Egon told them while packaging the fruit and jumping in the driver's seat. Hollyhock took up the passenger side and Izuku in the back as the tall man kicked their flatbed into a four-wheeler drive to go over the newly roughed-out terrain. As they drive out of the forest, Hollyhock spoke to Egon and asked him, "That brings up something I didn't get a chance at the meeting. What are we gonna do when our body of government overlords catches wind of what we're doing, and you know they will? We'll set up a meeting, establish ground rules, then go public. And from there we'll be able to do more stuff?" Izuku assured her. "Like making a new island for one dragon," she commented back while raising an eyebrow. Izuku smiled with a thumbs up and answered, "That's the plan." Back in Japan at the national diet where the Prime Minister presided, an elderly yet stern-looking woman was sitting at a table and eating a large Japanese-style breakfast while watching the news on her phone while skimming through the political section of a newspaper. Suddenly her large office doors were slammed open and a young man with a worm and ragged look burst in while running at top speed as he breathlessly ran to her. "Prime Minister! Prime Minister! Important news," the man practically yelled, a panicked look in his eyes. Not even dazed by this scene, the woman continues to eat and read while saying nonchalantly, "What is it, Ryu? I'm in the middle of breakfast." It's Hokkaido, ma'am," he tells her in a hurried tone. "It's a nuclear wasteland, Ryu." "What about it?" she says while looking down at her paper to roll her eyes as she chances channel on her phone. "It's not," he says vaguely. Confused and shocked, the Prime Minister puts down her paper to look at the young man and ask him, "What?" Taking a deep breath, the man explained, "The science department just came with a report of the isotope levels in Hokkaido, suddenly dropping. It is safe for human habitation again." He placed a folder on the table and opened it up. The Prime Minister took the folder and looked over the files within. After skimming through everything, her face growing ever more shocked, she finally put them down, took a sip of tea, and crossed her bony fingers in thought. "I don't believe it. How did this happen?" she asked in a soft voice. "It may have something to do with the dense forest that has sprouted up overnight," Ryu offered. The Prime Minister snapped her old head towards him and shooting him a look she stated, "Really? Are you going off on an ecological miracle for an answer?" He shrugged then counteroffered, "Well, we also think that it may have to do with this place." Saying that, he flipped through a few more pages in the folder which brought up information about the Neo-Icon Phoenix research facility, a picture of it, alongside a pic of Egon and Izuku. Narrowing her eyes at the photos, she said without looking up, "Call them up and set up a meeting." When Egon got a call from the Prime Minister of Japan herself, seeking an audience, he was unsurprised but still nervous. Sure, he expected it to happen at some point and even very soon, but he couldn't hold his feelings. So he and Izuku get ready for the day that she comes. Even though they didn't have to get ready since they'd been prepping for it in advance. So it was all a matter of refresher and figuring out what to say. So the day comes and the two scientists find themselves in their meeting room with the head of government in Japan. An elderly lady who has shown years of experience and experience shit. Gray hair, wrinkles, yet sharp eyes, and an even sharper grimace. She was a force to be reckoned with. However, they had the ball in their court. So there they sat and drank tea in silence for the first few minutes. "So, Madam Prime Minister, enjoying your tea?" Egon inquired as she said nothing in return. Drumming his fingers to give off the sense he was nervous, he followed up, "I was wondering when you'd call. I suppose late is better than never." She took another sip of her tea before saying, "After your most recent achievement and many others hidden in the dark, your laboratory was brought to the forefront of my attention. Well, we did save Hokkaido and you billions in cleanup. Now all that money can go towards rebuilding," Izuku argued back. Sending him a hard glare, she retorted, "I didn't come to thank you for that or talk to a child." Egon clenched his crossed hands at the comment and, trying to keep his cool, calmly told her, "With all due respect, madam, he is the whole reason that NIP exists. Without him, Hokkaido would still be a wasteland. So I suggest you respect him for that much at the very least. He may be young, but even I have to admit he's far smarter than me." The Prime Minister looked between the man and the tree before sighing and saying, "Very well." She then waved for one of her guards and they brought out a huge stack of papers and 2 pens where she told them, "Now on to the topic of business. Sign here and dash dot." No, we won't be doing anything like that, madam." Izuku quickly shut her down, making her glare harshly at him. "I beg your pardon," she asked back with a calm, sharp tone. "No offense, but NIP will not be one of your lapdogs held under your thumb and many restrictions," Izuku explained to her. Egon chimed in and added, "Without even a single bit of help from any government funding or inclusion, we were able to build this place from the ground up, and won't be needing it now." She narrows her eyes at the men while tightening her hands around the pens and tells them, "I hope you realize what you are doing is illegal." Both men resist the urge to laugh while Egon informs her, "We have plenty of certifications, notarized and accepted by the government with your seal of approval," a fact that makes the Prime Minister scowl at herself. "While I admit we were trespassing on government property, it was also uninhabitable and we made it habitable," Egon argues back nicely. The Prime Minister opens up her mouth to argue back with him, but Izuku cuts her off as politely as he can and tells her, "Madam Prime Minister, let's just stop you right there. We're not going to budge unless you want to go in circles all day. And if you want to do a protracted court battle, I can give you the cards of the 17 law firms we hired." He then gets a text on his phone, reads it, widens his eyes, and corrects himself, "Oh sorry, now it's at 21 law firms." The Prime Minister takes a very long drawn-out breath and after calming herself down taking the same neutral stern expression, she asks them, "What do you want then?" The two men smile at seeing her surrender and Egon tells her, "In essence, we just want to be left alone. However, in return for this, you'll be the first to know about every invention, weapon, or creature we make here and have first dibs on it. Even before the public knows of it. If you want to buy it, then buy as much or little as you want. Sounds good?" She raised an eyebrow and asks back, "So you want to be secretive and have open trade? Sounds rather suspicious. I won't know everything you're doing and for what reasons. We all have secrets, madam. Us with NIP and you with Hokkaido," Egon says with a knowing hum in his voice that makes the woman try her best to hide any expression. The man then continued and told her, "As for our reasons, it is for the good of humankind and science. We have no ill intent. And even if we did, we are not at a state where we can easily defend ourselves against you." The Prime Minister closes her eyes and sits there in deep thought for a while. After which she takes her tea glass, finishes it up and after smacking her lips she tells them, "Very well. You men have a deal." And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, subscribe, share the video and support the original writer. See you in the next video?